You're listening to the REI Marketing Nerds podcast, the leading resource for real estate investors who want to dominate their market online. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds, a high-tech digital agency focusing exclusively on helping real estate investors like you get more leads and deals online, outsmart your competition, and live a freer, more awesome life. And now, your host, Dan Barrett.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the REI Marketing Nerds podcast. As always, this is Daniel Barrett here from AdWordsNerds.com. Oh my gosh, I am so happy to be back. Now, I don't know if you even were aware that I was gone. Been running some rerun episodes of this podcast because I was going through a lot of back sort of stage training work, training new managers at AdWords Nerds, building out really what is a world-class online marketing team. And I'm so excited for those folks to be working with our clients. But I got to tell you, I really missed doing the podcast. I really missed doing the podcast. And I thought, what better guest to kick things back off with than one of my favorite people in real estate investing. This is none other than Mike Simmons. Mike Simmons from Just Start Real Estate. You can find out more about Mike at MikeSimmons.com, MikeSimmons, MikeSimmons.com. This is truly a remarkable investor and human being. And he's a great human being. He's just kind, an incredible teacher, someone who's very open about his own struggles and the things that he's done that work, someone that shares and educates the community, but a world-class operator, if ever there was one. And here is the proof that sort of shows you that this is true. Mike Simmons works 2 hours a week on his real estate investing business and does over 100 deals a year. 100 deals a year, spending 2 hours a week. Not only that, but he's got a very busy coaching business, an incredible, beautiful family, great relationship with his kids. This is a person that is firing on all cylinders. And I am so excited to get to share this interview with you. So without any further ado, let's dive into my interview with Mike Simmons. All right, I'm here with Mike Simmons. Mike, how are you? Welcome to the show, man. It's wonderful to have you. I've been very much looking forward to this, so I hope you have been too.
Yeah, I'm going to say something that really probably isn't smart for me to say, but I'm going to say it because it's honest and I'm just feeling it in the moment. I look forward to very few things that I do online, very few meetings that I have. I swear to you, I am an introvert by nature. And so I agree to everything in the world. And then 10 minutes before it's going to start, I dread it. And I'm asking my assistant, why are we doing this? Why did I agree to it? This I am looking forward to, and I was sincerely happy to be doing it today because I just enjoy you so much. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, man. The feeling is very mutual, down to the why did I agree to do this? And in fact, I read the thing where they were like, oh, the question you should ask yourself before you agree to something is like, would I do this if it was like today? And the answer is almost like never. So I'm like, okay, no, that's good. I'm going to start asking this. Well,
it's significant too, because even family events, at the moment I have to go, I'm like, why are we doing that? I don't want to do this. Like, you rank even higher than that. So you're just fun to talk to, dude. So I enjoy it.
Oh, well, I cannot tell. I very much appreciate that. And I was really looking forward to this because you have such a unique background. And the thing that I know about you after knowing you for a number of years now, really, is like you're this really great combination of someone who is both an A-level world-class operator, investor, like the business side, you have a really strong grasp on, but you also know how to teach and how to talk about what you do, which is those skill sets are different, right? And they don't always come together. So I'm super excited to have you on. So for people that don't know you, aren't familiar with your work, right? You are all over this place in real estate investing. You obviously invest and you coach and you podcast and all these things. So give people kind of the elevator pitch for who is Mike Simmons, what's your kind of current role or position in the industry.
Okay. So elevator pitch. I am a guy from the Midwest, Michigan. Super yawn, right? Like I'm not from the coast. I'm not exciting that way. I was a pretty average student, a pretty average athlete. Went into the 9-to-5 world in Michigan. Yeah, that's the automotive industry. It's just you get your hand gets stamped when you're born and you're going to go in the automotive industry. And I did that, and I was miserable, hated it, like a lot of people, right? But what I got really focused and good at, and really was passionate about at some point in my life, in my early 30s, was figuring out a way out, right? I looked at it as like the great, jail breakout. Like I felt like I was in jail. I felt like I was just marching, this dystopian kind of marching down the halls of this corporate world that I was in, and there was no obvious way out. And when I found a way out in real estate, I became real focused on doing it. Right? It was like, what would you do? People come to me and say, I can't find deals, or I'm, real estate's hard. I don't know if I can do it. And sometimes I give them the example, like, well, what if you have kids? Yes, I have kids. Well, what if somebody had your kid hostage and they said, if you don't start your real estate business and show some sort of traction within the first couple of months, we're going to kill your kid, right? It's like horrible, but of course you would do it. You could do it, right? You would figure it out. And I sort of approached it that way. Like, I'm so miserable. I don't want to live this life. And so I set upon this course to figure it out. And I had no great advantage. I'm from the Midwest. It was like union family. Like my dad was in the union, and my mom was a beautician, and like just normal, right? Nobody an entrepreneur. But I figured it out with no great advantage at all. I didn't even have any money when I started. Like I was working at a job, not making very much money. But I figured it out, and I became a student of being an entrepreneur and understanding not only how to build my business, but what I learned was, and what I got really, really excited about was not just how to start a business, because a lot of people can start a business and get on this hamster wheel where they replace the 9-to-5 with this business that they're a slave to, and they're working more and they're less happy than they were when they could just punch out at 5 o'clock and forget about it, right? They have this stress that's associated with it. What I became very excited about was, how do you create an actual business that can function and thrive without you pulling all the levers and getting on that hamster wheel? Like I'm running a business right now that I probably spend no more than 2 hours in per week. We buy and sell almost 100 houses a year. Like right now, there are 21 houses in our pipeline that's in some level of being purchased or sold or renovated or whatever. And honestly, I've only been in like one of them. And I was only in that one because my partner had to go out of town. And so I just went and looked at this house for him, right? Like I never do it. And so I got passionate about, how do you create this business, but also create the freedom of not just financial freedom, but the freedom of time that everyone wants. And honestly, I truly believe that people say, I want financial freedom. What they're saying is, I want to be able to do what I want when I want. And that's freedom of time. That's the holy grail, I think. And that's really what I'm excited about in business. Not creating money, because that can be done, right? If I just want to work 80 hours a week, but I want to create that money and work a handful of hours a week, or no hours if I want to go on vacation somewhere.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's like people always think money is the goal.
Yeah.
But if you said, well, hey, I'm going to give you all the money you want, but you're never going to see your kids, you're never going to watch TV again, like whatever it is, like whatever you love to do. TV or kids, equal things that are totally the same.
Very equal.
But it's like they don't want to do that, right? And you very quickly realize there's a set of things you're not willing to give up, or at least most people aren't. So before we dive into that, because the second you talk about, I work 2 hours a week and it's like we're doing 100 houses a year or whatever it is. God, I just want to dig into that so bad. So we're definitely going to get there. But before we do that, right? So let's go back to, you're working in a place that you don't particularly like. You don't have the entrepreneurial background. Like you said, like you were pretty miserable. And I read in the bio, right, that eventually is likely you kind of get into real estate investing a little bit online, but then you and your wife end up going to a seminar and you sort of get kicked off from there. But lots of people are miserable, right? Like lots of people are miserable. And if most people, I feel like they don't do things like start a business or get in started with real estate investing or anything really. They don't get out of their comfort zone because they just don't think of themselves as the type of person that can do that, right? So why do you think that you were able to get started in the first place? Like, what allowed you to kind of make that jump from, I'm just a regular guy to this is something that I personally am capable of doing?
It's a good question. So I think what did it for me, and I'll tell you, like I've talked about this before many times actually, but I decided that I wanted to be a real estate investor, and that was how I was going to make my fortune, and that's how I was going to have everything I ever wanted out of life. I decided in 2003. I didn't buy my first house until 2008. And so I did what most people do, maybe perpetually. I did it for 5 years. Is I told myself I was going to do it. I read books. I went to seminars. I listened to things online. Podcasting wasn't so much then, but like I procrastinated. I just sat in this like fear, and I would go to the meetups, like monthly, like real estate people meet up once a month, usually on a Thursday. For whatever reason, it's always a Thursday, but they get together and I would be in that environment. So I put myself in the environment. I read books, I listened to things, and you can sort of fool yourself that you're kind of in the game because you're around it and talking it all the time. But I wasn't making offers on houses. And it's like, you're not a real estate investor until you at least start making offers, and really until you get your first deal. And I did that for 5 years. But to answer your question, what made me actually make that step? A couple things. Something I never talk about, literally, like this is like breaking news here on your podcast. I've never talked about this, even on my own podcast. When I decided I wanted to become a real estate investor in 2003, I was approaching, I didn't know it, but I was approaching the end of my marriage. I didn't realize it. And so as I was trying to get the courage up and get my resources together and like get my mind wrapped around doing real estate, I was faced with a divorce. Yeah. And it sort of sidelined me. And it is an excuse. It's probably a fairly legitimate one, but it's still, it was an excuse for me to push that ball down the field a little farther and not do it. But once that happened and I got to the other side of that, I eventually met someone and got remarried. I was in so much of a better mental space, and I was working at a job. My kids at this time were like teenagers, young teen, preteen. And I realized after the divorce, the reason I bring it up is I got divorced and it was like split custody. I wasn't seeing my kids all the time. And when I was seeing them, sometimes I had to work late or be at work later than I wanted to be. And that really started to weigh on my mind. But another thing that was really huge for me is growing up, my dad was a Marine. He was a Vietnam vet, Marine, hardcore. And if there was one thing that wasn't tolerated in my family growing up, all boys, by the way, with this Marine dad, was fear and to not do things because you're afraid. The first sport I ever played, organized sport, was baseball. And because my brother was a couple years older than me and my dad didn't want to have to go to 2 practices he's like, no, you're going to play in that league with him, with the older kids. Right. And I was like,
that's a classic, like dad solution to a problem.
Total dad solution.
I'm just going to smash everything into one trip. It's going to be great.
They won't let the older kid play with the younger kids, but they'll let the younger kid, apparently my dad talked him into it, play with the older kids. And not only did I play, he didn't stick me in the outfield where I was relatively safe. He put me behind the plate. I was a catcher. From these kids that were older than me. 2 years is a lot of years when you're 11, 12 years old. And they were throwing some heat. I was petrified, but he made me get behind that plate every single practice, every single game. And it's like, he just wouldn't tolerate fear. And so really after 5 years of procrastinating and using my divorce and all these other things happening in my life as an excuse, I honestly got sick of myself. Like I got tired of the excuse. I knew I was lying to myself about why I wasn't getting started. It was just fear. It was all fear. I didn't want to fail, and I didn't want to tell people what I was doing because if it didn't work, I didn't want to, all that kind of stuff. So that Marine dad in my head, and like my kids getting older and realizing I don't get to see them every single day, which sucks, right? As a parent who really wants to see their kids. And so the time that I could see them, I was absolutely determined to be able to spend as much time as possible with them. When they get home from school, I wanted to be able to be there at 2:30 or 3 o'clock, not have to work until 6, right? Like all that sucked. So few of those things kind of converged to just make me finally like throw my hands up and go, I can't keep making these excuses. I've got to do something. And by the way, I had a wife now that I felt like we were on the same page, and I got her on board and kind of explained my vision of what I want to do to her. And we went to the seminar that you referenced, and it was really a local guy who did a weekend boot camp, and it was $29.99. I remember, and you could bring a guest or a spouse for free. Back then, and still now, I don't want to sound like $29.99 isn't a lot. I mean, $2,999. It's a lot of money, but it was
I literally thought you meant $30 for a second.
No. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, that's not nothing, right? That's a meal. It's like, okay, now
exactly.
It makes more sense.
Exactly. So basically $3,000. I don't know why I'm giving you the exact numbers. $3,000.
Well, at the time that was probably a big deal, right? There's always a point at which the investments that later seem like, well, of course, when you originally make them, it's a huge jump, right? That's no joke. Like this is the first thing that you guys are doing. It's a big deal. Yeah.
It was huge. And my wife, I don't have a lot of fear. When I was afraid, by the way, of getting started, it had nothing to do with risking money. I'm not afraid of that. For whatever reason, I weirdly have no feelings when it comes to risking money. It doesn't scare me. But my wife grew up really poor. Her family was really poor. And she's frugal. She is not someone to spend money on something and not understand the benefit. So I knew if I convinced her to go to this thing and spend $3,000 for like 3 days, right? There was no way she was going to let me sit around and not take action. And so it was a good fail-safe, right? It was like this good insurance policy I had that if I got lazy, I know she's not going to get lazy. So we went to that. And honestly, the material wasn't worth $3,000. Like it was just okay. But what it did do was it gave us belief, and it because we spent the money, we were motivated to not have wasted that kind of money. And so that was really the jump start to my real estate business.
I mean, it's such a cool story, right? Because you are combining so many things that go into anytime you dive into somebody's story of like a significant behavior modification, right? Whether it's like, I lost 500 pounds or like whatever, right? Any dramatic change that somebody makes, you usually find some sort of painful situation that's like more painful than doing nothing, right? You find some sort of accountability mechanism, like you took your wife and she's going to really give you a hard time, which is like amazing, right? You find somebody that just makes it seem possible, right? There's some reason to think you might be successful. It's a really cool, you got the sunk cost of the program. I mean, all these things are so powerful, and especially if you stack them all together, I don't know. I find that angle to the story really cool. So I'm really glad that you shared it with us, because I think that's really awesome. So let's flash forward to today. So you were talking about you spend 2 hours a week, you're doing investing, you're also doing coaching, right? You also work with real estate investors.
Yeah.
I believe the program is still called Just Start, right? Which is like one of my, I told somebody this earlier. It's like one of my favorite all-time names of any coaching program, because it's like, you have to start. Like that's the first part of it. So break down for people kind of like how your real estate investing sort of business is broken up now, because you got the investing, you got the coaching, kind of give people the lay of the land for what you're doing today. Yeah.
And I should say, in all like transparency, I work more than 2 hours a week. But on my real estate investing company, I spend 2 hours a week, right? I do coaching and other stuff. So the business, my real estate investing business that I have, we have been traditionally, by and large, a wholesaling company, which means, for people listening, if you don't know, we find sellers who are interested in selling their house. We agree on a price, we get on a contract, and then we assign that contract to a landlord or a house flipper who wants to take it on and do the work. And we're kind of the middleman. So we've done that for years. We've changed our model a little bit, kind of irrelevant, but we're doing a little more land contract. We're buying things, holding them, and selling them on land contract. A little bit of different. But I created this business and this team that allows me to do that a little bit on autopilot as an owner. So that's one thing. We can go back to how I built that team and why it's able to run without me and how that all happened. But I think you were kind of asking for a broader scope of what I'm up to. So that is the real estate investing company that I own. I also do coaching, like you said. And coaching for me it's honestly a labor of love. It's nothing that, like, I'm not that guy who like used to invest and now he makes $1 million a year coaching and he doesn't really invest anymore, like that lopsided model that some people do. And it's fine, whatever. But I'm an investor, and I also, oh, by the way, I do some coaching also on the side. It's not my focus. Ironically, I spend more time doing that than I do my own business, but I love doing it because I have actually been very instrumental, if not crucial, in people starting, growing, scaling their business, finding that financial freedom. And it's just so fun to watch that happen. And it's so gratifying to have people send you a text or an email or something saying, dude, like, there's this one guy who was in my coaching program and he was like, you know what, I'm just not sure if this is working for me and blah, blah, blah. We got on a phone call and I've been on a phone call with him like once a week for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And now he's calling me. He's like, I went from, I don't know where to find a deal, I'm having trouble, to I've got like 3 or 4 going right now. Like, things are exploding. This is amazing. And I love seeing that turnaround. It's super exciting for me. So I do a lot of coaching. I've started a lending company about a year ago. And now I'm starting to lend money to investors, because if there's 2 things that I know that investors have always had a challenge with or struggled with, it's finding deals and finding money, right? And they're both very doable, but those are the 2 things, right? And so if I can help people do those things, I know that they can be successful, because everything in the middle is very figure outable. It's not that big of a deal, but finding deals, finding money has always been the 2 big pillars. And I try to make sure that we always focus on that. So I lend money to people now that are in my course, and some people that are other folks that I've just known through coaching. I'm very selective. It's not open to the general public. Generally, you got to be working with me, or I have to know you a little bit, because I don't charge a lot of interest. It's very reasonable, but I don't take big swings either. I don't bet on people I don't know with very big projects. Like, I kind of scrape the cream off the top, and I work with people that I know what they're doing, because either I've taught them or I just know their business. And then finally, I do have a podcast, and I started, my kids are a little older now. So one of them wants to do some short-term rental stuff. And so I'm working with her to buy short-term rentals and help her create a little financial freedom and get out of the 9-to-5 rat race and all that. So,
wow, that's cool. I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's so cool. And I have no, like, I would never have said yes to that and under any circumstances. But when your daughter comes to you and says, hey, Dad, I want to do this thing, it's like, would you want to do it together? It'd be kind of fun. It's like dad-daughter thing. Heck yeah, I will push some things aside and do that. Because if we can, the goal is to get 10 short-term rentals generating $10,000, minimum $10,000 a month. And that would get her out of her 9-to-5. Like, that's awesome. That would be so cool. And she's 27 years old. Like, to have financial time freedom at that age, amazing.
Can you imagine? I don't know. Maybe you were already. I don't think you were already started. Yeah, no. I was not doing that at 27.
No, I was in my late 30s before I really got going with real estate. So yeah, I had a long career of misery before that.
Yeah, we thought that's weird. You used to work at Misery. I also used to work at
Misery Inc.
Want to find motivated seller leads online, but don't know where to start? Download our free Motivated Seller Keyword Report today. AdWords nerds have spent over $5 million this year researching the most profitable keywords for finding motivated seller leads. And you can grab these exact keywords when you download our report at www.adwordsnerds.com/keywords.
So I am really curious. I would say that from my experience, right? So working at AdWords Nerds, working with real estate investors, different real estate investors at various stages of their careers and their businesses, all different types of markets. The number one thing we look for as an agency when we're trying to decide, do we want to work with this person? Is this person going to be around for a long time? They're going to be able to be our client for a long time? Like, that's really what we're aiming for, right? And the number one thing we look for is, how are they fulfilling the service of being a real estate investor? Like, what do their logistics look like? What is their system? What do their systems look like? We used to work with all kinds of people, and we just kind of started realizing, like, hey, if you are, just make something up, but like, you're managing all your leads on the back of a napkin every day, right? You're just writing them down. You're like, I got them. That's a warning sign for us. Like, I went out to dinner for Father's Day with my family. It took me to a new restaurant. And the server came up. They're like, hey, welcome. And we're like, yeah, we're really excited to eat here. And they're like, great. What does everybody want? And we're like, okay, we're going to get these appetizers. And then we're going through the entrees. And she's doing the thing where she's not writing anything down.
Oh, I hate that.
We were all like,
I hate that.
My wife and I like slowly like are like making eye contact. And I'm like, it's not going to go well, right? And it didn't go great. But anyway, that's kind of what I'm looking for in a real estate investor. I'm like, are you writing this down? Are you going to,
Yeah,
So
it's so funny.
Going from the full bore business to something that is extremely streamlined, it strikes me that you have to have a really good understanding of the process and where the processes can break down and how do you prevent that. So let's start with the obvious place, which is when you talk to real estate investors, you work with your students, where do you see the biggest mistakes being in terms of how they are running their businesses? Like the processes, the systems. Is it that they don't have systems? Is it that they feel like they have to do everything themselves? Like what are the big mistakes that if people can avoid, they're going to put them on the right path to begin with?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've never been asked that, but it's a great question. There's so many mistakes, but some of the big ones are trying. Okay, so this is in no particular order, but I'm just kind of going as I think of the big ones. Trying to run the business by themselves for too long, not knowing when they need to bring someone in for help, and really not always bringing in the right person. For example, I had someone tell me recently, one of my students, they said, hey, can we hop on the phone? I have a marketing problem. I'm not getting enough leads. Or, we're just not, I have a marketing problem. And I said, okay. So we got on the phone, we started doing some discovery. I'm like, okay, let me see your marketing piece. Like, what are you doing? How often are you sending things out? Like, what are you doing? Pay-per-click? Are you doing cold calling? Like, what are you doing? Like, I'm getting a handle on everything they're doing. And I said, all right, how many leads are you getting? How much money are you spending? And we went through all of this discovery on their marketing. And I was like, dude, you're getting better response rates than I am. You do not have a marketing problem. Tell me what happens once the lead comes in. And he started explaining his process. And it's like, I said, you don't have a marketing problem. You have a sales problem. You have a phone person. Like your problem is coming after the marketing. You're getting a lot of leads. You're not getting money at the end of this pipe. Money isn't spitting out, and you're blaming the beginning of the pipe, but it's the middle of the pipe. And so So first of all, they were answering the phone, and by their own admission, they hate talking on the phone and they don't think they're good at it. But they're spending money to drive massive leads, and then those leads are coming to someone who hates dealing with the leads. And I said, there's your problem. You immediately need to put yourself out of that position and get somebody in there who enjoys people, enjoys talking to people, and can get something out of them in terms of motivation and that kind of stuff. So not knowing when to hire people. You mentioned on the back of the napkin thing, it's a double-edged sword. CRM in our industry is important. It can be something that keeps people from moving forward because they're intimidated by the software they have to learn. Yeah. And so I tell people, use a spreadsheet or whatever in the beginning. But as your business starts growing, and when people come to you, for example, and say, hey, I want to have this marketing channel, by that point, they really need to have some kind of a CRM that they're utilizing, because the worst thing you can do, and the little joke that I have within my coaching community is when you create a lead, it's sort of like somebody has dropped a baby and put that on your doorstep. You can't leave it out there all night. It will die. So when you get leads in your business, they can't just come into a voicemail or someone takes a message and puts it in CRM and no way. You have to actively work that lead. It's precious. You paid for it. It's alive. You're going to kill it if you just let it sit there. And so people let leads languish. Surprisingly, in this market, the people that I'm coaching and talking to a lot of times are not having a significant problem creating leads. They're having a problem turning those leads into deals. That's where they're really struggling. And a lot of times that's a incoming phone call person that isn't doing a good job, or that's not what they should be doing. Or they're getting that lead and getting an appointment and they're blowing it on the sales side of it. And so to your point with that person who said, I have a marketing problem, I don't blame you. You can come in and implement the greatest marketing strategy in the world and SEO and pay-per-click. And the leads come in and they go, well, you're not doing a good job for me. It's like, no, you're getting leads. You are blowing it because you're not paying attention in working those leads. And so having that system and having the right, often this is a big problem too. People really focus and they'll spend a lot of time, energy, and money what we call acquisitions, or the salesperson, right? The person who's actually talking to the homeowner, going to the home, looking around and trying to negotiate a deal. Everyone acknowledges and everyone realizes that that's a very important position in your company, and it absolutely is. And I made this mistake too, huge mistake, huge. I discounted and devalued the person who answers the phone. In my opinion, and this sounds terrible, but I'm just being honest, when I started my business and then we started ramping up, I really thought that was anybody with a heartbeat, with a hand to pick up a phone, could do that job. Who cares who does that job? Just put anybody there, and then let's focus on getting a world-class salesperson. What I realized was that person who answers the phone, they're the gatekeeper. If they're terrible, I don't care how good your salesperson is, he'll never talk to that homeowner, because the gatekeeper is keeping the gate closed, or they're causing people to not want to go through the gate because they're horrible. And so that's a big miss. People just think, oh, I'll get a VA, or like, and you can get a VA and they can do a fine job, but it's such a throwaway position for most people. And it's actually super critical that you have the right person answering the phones or taking those incoming leads.
Yeah, it strikes me right. It's literally the first impression, right? It's the very first experience, maybe outside of a postcard or whatever got them to call you in the first place, right? It's the first time they're really going to engage with you. And yeah, if it doesn't go well, that's such an interesting. So let's tie that back into one of the other mistakes that you mentioned, right? Which is leaving yourself in the business too long. How do you know when it's time, right? How do you know when it's time to bring someone in? Is it just that you're overworked? Is it that you're dropping the ball? The example that you mentioned, right? It's more of a skill thing where it's like, I know I'm sort of throttling the business growth, but the fact of like, it's very similar to AdWords. When I used to do all the sales calls for AdWords, it didn't do so hot, right? Because I would always be like, whatever, right? And that was kind of my vibe, right? So how do you know when it's time to bring someone new in?
Yeah. So there's an old, like, kind of a cliche that when you start wondering if it's time to hire, it's already late. Like you should have already hired. That is kind of true. It's sort of cliche, but it's actually really true. But I always tell people, if you see a bottleneck, obviously that's a time to hire, right? But if the part of the business or if there is a part of the business, and there always is, that you dislike, you just don't like it, chances are you're bad at it. Very rarely do people do something that they hate and they're just amazing at it. It can happen, but usually they're bad at it. So it's really sooner than later you should be hiring. And it's not so much when should I hire? It's for most people, it's how can I hire? I don't feel like, and I fell into this trap too. For a long time in my business, I would say to myself, I need help. I need to hire, but I'm not big enough. I'm not a big enough company to have employees. But the reality was, and the circular logic was, but I'll never be a big enough company unless I hire. But I can't hire because I'm not a big enough company, right? And this terrible circular logic. But what I was able to do, and I kind of stumbled upon it, but it's you can replicate it. It's not unique. Is I always thought, and I think most people think, I can't hire because I can't afford the payroll, or I don't want to bring someone in. My business is small. I don't want them to rely on me, because what if I don't get a deal for a month or two? Like, what happens? Right. And so what I didn't consider and what I discounted was hiring people, not only part-time, but like, for example, I was bad at sales. When sales calls would come in, or like I was the guy who shouldn't be answering the phone, because I would get a call in my business and I would see it. I knew it was a seller calling about some marketing I did. And I would watch it go to voicemail because I so badly didn't want to answer that call, because I just don't like answering those calls. And so it would hurt me, right? And then even when I went on appointments, I'm not a sales guy. I'm not good at that. And so I just was bad, right? And so when I realized that I needed to change that, I knew I wasn't doing enough volume to really keep a great salesperson interested. And so I stumbled upon it, but you can go out and purposely do this. But what happened with me is I got an email from somebody who said, hey, I found you online, heard your podcast. I'm local. Would you have lunch with me? I'd love to pick your brain, and like blah, blah, blah. And I almost always ignore those or say, no, thank you, or whatever. I just don't have time. But I just went for whatever reason. And I sat down with this young guy. and he's telling me he's in sales. He does pharmaceutical sales locally. He has a local route. He's on the road all day, but it's local. And he wants to buy rentals, and he's just picking my brain. And he was a nice kid. He seemed super enthusiastic. And after the meeting, before I even got home, I received an email where he recapped our entire meeting, and he gave me a bullet point list of things he thought he could do for me for free that he would love to do just to learn. And I was like, wow, what a go-getter. How killer professional, how
job,
great.
Right? Already doing a killer sales job.
Right.
Yeah.
Long story short, I hired him. Now, the cool thing about this, and the thing that I tell people that they can replicate, is he had a full-time job, but he was great at it. He was a great salesperson. And so in his world, he would go out on the road, he would talk to these doctors, but he could just crush his job in like just a few hours a week. He was spending most of his time at home playing Call of Duty because he was, and by the way, they were giving him awards and sending him to Hawaii because he was the top regional salesperson. Wow. And he's like, this is so easy for me, right? Yeah. And so I hired him on a full commission basis. So I don't pay him unless I get money. He didn't need it to pay his bills, right? So find someone who's really good at what they're doing, really great salesperson who can do it for you part-time. They can ease their way in. And so he started answering calls for me and going on appointments while still crushing his normal 9 to 5, whatever job. And I would go on 5 appointments and I would get 1 contract on average. If I went on 5, I'd get 1. He would go on 5 once he came on board, and he would get 3 on average. That is a monumental change in revenue and in cash flow. And so once I did that, everything opened up to me. Now I could start bringing in dedicated phone people. I could hire other key people that I needed, a bookkeeper. I mean, I was doing my own books. It was keeping me up at night. So I could start building out this team that could help me. And it all started by bringing in the person who was great at what I was bad at. And it changed everything for me. Had I not done that, I don't know what I would have done. I would have had a really crappy company.
I mean, yes, you probably, it'd still be car manufacturing or whatever you'd be doing. It's like, it strikes me, right? It's like, it's all about understanding that it's not either or. It's not, well, I'm too small to hire someone for $60,000 a year salary, right? It's like you can hire someone per deal or on commission or on a temporary basis, right? There are ways of trying to break that paradigm. God, I love talking about this. I want to keep talking about this. I want to touch base real quick on direct mail, right? Because we've sort of skirted around it. I know you're working on, or you have a kind of like a guide out right now, is sort of getting into direct mail for people that, my thing is making noise, which is annoying. But so for people that, direct mail's been around real estate investing for a long time. And I think what people tend to think is, it's too crowded, it's too competitive, there's too many people doing it. So, when you talk to someone that's thinking about doing direct mail, or, they're thinking about implementing it in their business, what do you say to that person that's like, I just don't know if it's for me, or it seems like it's too difficult now?
Yeah. So to me, it's always amazing that direct mail is a thing, because it's like the same reason why I'm baffled why there's still trains. Like, how can there still be trains? Trains were a thing in the 1800s. People still get on trains. Like, what are we talking about, right? It's 2022. So direct mail is still a thing. It is crowded. Everything's crowded, right? So it's not too crowded. What I have found, the two things that have gotten me the most deals in my business, and I've done over 700 deals in the last 7 years, right? Wow. The two marketing strategies that have far and away destroyed everything else that I've tried is direct mail and pay-per-click. Those are the two things that have consistently worked for me. I don't have the knowledge to talk about pay-per-click intelligently. I can only talk from a surface level. I hire that out. But direct mail, I have been the one doing it, and I have spent over $1 million. Literally, I calculate. I went back, so I wasn't going to be lying, and I wanted to make sure it'd be so cool if I could say I've spent over $1 million on direct mail, and I have. I actually have. So I've spent that much money, and when you spend that kind of money, by the way, my direct mail piece is 35 cents. So imagine how many pieces have to be sent out to get to $1 million at 35 cents a pop, right? It's a lot. It's a lot of learning, and people do it so poorly. It's amazing that the amount of money they'll spend and not really know what they're doing. They're just sort of like guessing and throwing things out there into the ether and seeing what happens. And so I get the question a lot. I put together a 5-video course. They're short-ish videos. I always split it into 5 so that the topics were very clear and very clear-cut and distinct. But it's 5, 10 to 15-minute videos where I walk through my entire direct mail process, starting with the card that I use and why I use it, because I think it's important not to just give you my card, right, and go, here you go. Because at some point you're going to want to try other cards and other creatives. And so I give you my card, and the one that has definitely made me the most money, but I also break down exactly why it works and what is right and what can be wrong if you do other things. And so I give them, it's like, give a man a fish, teach a man to fish kind of a thing. I'm trying to teach you to fish and give you the fish. But then I go through the entire process of how I create it, how I get it printed, how I get it mailed out. And I also, as a bonus, would talk about when the calls come in, how do you handle that effectively? Like, what is the best practices when the calls start coming in? And so I created all that and started thinking about, what am I going to charge for it? I mean, honestly, I could charge whatever I want because I know this can make people a lot of money. And I decided to make it free just to get it out there and get that information out into the world. And it's totally free. So if you go to my website, mikesimmons.com/winning direct mail, you can get that for absolutely free. No obligation at all. So you can go grab that. But that's how I do it. And like I said, it's antiquated for sure, but it still works. For whatever reason, it still absolutely works.
I mean, we were talking before the show, right? And you were like, oh, I don't know if like direct mail is really your thing. Cause it's like, obviously like I do online marketing, but for me, right, I'm not an absolutist in the sense that there's no one thing that's right for everybody all the time. And the thing that is undeniable is that direct mail is in REI so deeply and has been such a core part of the business model for so long because it works. I mean, it just works. It's like impossible to argue with that fact, because to do so, you would have to say like, well, everyone's irrational in the universe, because I think it's still the most common marketing methodology. Again, so if you're listening to this and you want to go check that out, it's MikeSimmons.com. Simmons is SIMMONS.com/winning direct mail. I personally am going to take the course because like I'm super curious about it. And I love direct mail from like a conceptual point of view. Like all my favorite kind of like marketing heroes are guys like Dan Kennedy and stuff like sort of came up in direct mail. And I always have fantasies of writing like a 4-page letter that's going to make me like $1 bajillion. I've never done it. I'm terrible at it. I don't know my strengths, but that's like my, that's the sort of the top for me.
Let me say this, Dan, real quick. This is an important point, and I want to make this because direct mail is a crowded space. But something that one of my mentors told me and that I found to be absolutely true, and this is, I'm directing this at like maybe the smaller investor who's worried that they're competing with these other bigger investors who have more money and more resources and a bigger team and all this. The one way, and this applies to me too, right? Because I'm a scaled up investor with a bigger team. The one way to beat the people with more resources, more money, bigger team, bigger company, more experience, the one advantage you have when you're doing direct mail as a newer or smaller investor is to beat them to the punch. You always have that advantage when you're small. A speedboat can always outmaneuver a cruise ship, and you're a speedboat. And so when that mail goes out, answer the call live, get on the phone and get out to their house as soon as possible and get the contract, because companies like me or bigger companies even, they have a process and a team. And sometimes, despite the best efforts to be efficient, it takes a little longer to get through their system and to get out there and to like decide they're going to round robin their salespeople and who has time and who got and it's like all that crap they're doing in the background. You just get out there and get the contract. So direct mail is competitive, but if you use the one advantage you have, or the one major advantage, speed, you can beat the bigger guys. You really can.
Yeah, I love that too. And it ties back to what we were talking about even earlier, right? We were talking about CRMs and we were talking about just picking up the phone, and we were talking about the first person. It's like the first person in that process. Like the number one correlated factor that we see in terms of people who have who have success, a Freudian slip, who have success with pay-per-click marketing, the number one correlated factor is speed to lead. Right? It's always speed to lead. And it is just a thing that so many people sleep on. Mike, I'm coming up on time.
Yeah.
Will you please come back on this show and do this again? Because there's so much more I didn't even get to talk about, like the thing with your daughter, and there's like so much more I want to get to. Will you do another episode of this show with me?
100%. Yeah.
Because I would
love
absolutely love that. For people that are listening, obviously we've said it a couple times. If you're in the car or you're running or whatever, commit this to your memory. It's MikeSimmons.com. Is there anywhere else that you want people to follow you or learn about you online?
If they go there, they're going to find everything, right? I've got a podcast that I love and I'm very proud of, but you can find it at MikeSimmons.com. So go and check out the website and you can see everything I'm up to.
All right. Obviously, we're going to have all the links to that stuff in the show notes because that's what you legally have to do if you have a podcast that's in the bylaws. You have to.
You'll get arrested, sir, if you don't do
it. But Mike, I cannot tell you again. I mean, I mentioned this before, but you're one of my favorite people in this industry. I always have so much fun talking to you. We're going to get a proper, I messed up the scheduling earlier and it's sort of a little shorter than normal. I'm going to get a proper session with you where we really dive into the weeds if that's something you want to do. So thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's a blast. Like I said, all kidding aside, you're one of my favorite people in this industry as well. And I was excited to do this because I love talking to you. You're a blast.
All right. Awesome, man. All right. I'll talk to you soon. All right. That's going to do it for this week's episode of the REI Marketing Nerds podcast. As always, if you want to learn more about AdWords Nerds, you can go over to adwordsnerds.com where we help real estate investors do more deals online. We do pay-per-click marketing. We do Facebook. We do SEO. We do it all. We even do social media. So if you need help getting more deals online, you know where to go. It's adwordsnerds.com. And of course, you can find show notes for this episode and all our past episodes at adwordsnerds.com/podcast. Go check it out. Of course, anywhere you get this podcast, if you got a chance to leave us a review or thumbs up or whatever, we would really appreciate it. It helps other people find the show. I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in every week. It really means a lot to me, and I'm going to really make every effort to get back into this podcast and make it the most kick-butt podcast I could possibly make it. I hope you have an awesome rest of your week, and I'll be talking to you very soon. Cheers.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.